US Steel and Nippon Steel, in reaction to President Biden officially terminating the deal, which was his right after CFIUS was deadlocked on what to do over national security. And it's a feisty statement here. They're shooting back. We are dismayed by President Biden's decision to block this deal, which reflects, they say, a clear violation of due process and the law governing CFIUS. Instead of abiding by the law, the process was manipulated to advance President Biden's political agenda. The president's statement and order do not present any credible evidence of national security issues, making clear that this was a political decision. So they are accusing President Biden of blocking this deal on political grounds. Following President Biden's decision, according to the companies, we are left with no choice but to take all appropriate action to protect our legal rights. They don't go into any details about what that entails, but they promise this fight is not over and that there are legal actions. Then there's a few paragraphs about why the deal makes sense, as they have both defended it, and also about Nippon's efforts to try to engage with CFIUS, which is the committee that was set to decide whether this was legal on national security grounds, and the commitments made by Nippon Steel to strengthen national security, those they say that would have been highly enforceable by the law, and then continue to go after the decision. And I just would end finally by saying that they're going to do everything and continue to believe that the partnership is the best way to ensure that US Steel and its union represented employees will be able to compete and thrive well into the future. Again, just a reference to protect our legal rights and secure that future. So expect this to continue, a legal battle here.
Yeah, and it's obviously hard to argue against the point that obviously this is largely driven by political concerns. However, in a bipartisan way, right? I mean, President-elect Trump is also against the Nippon acquisition of US Steel, has been on the record.
Yeah, sure, which, you know, also political kind of issue. Megan Casella from Washington has been covering this case from the D.C. side. I mean, they're taking a shot at President Biden and the politics involved here, because they say they have economic grounds and they have national security grounds for doing this deal, and it protects U.S. workers.
Absolutely. The politics here have been really fascinating because President Biden and President-elect Trump have been united on this, both against this deal. We haven't heard from Trump yet today, though I've reached out to Mar-a-Lago to see if he has any updated thoughts on this. But then today we are seeing some Democrats, Jason Furman, for example, an economic official in the Obama administration, coming out and calling this sort of a craven move and really criticizing it, saying that Japan is an ally, that this investment would have been good for the company. And then there's been some back and forth there. What I think is going to be interesting here, and you noted some of this, Sarah, is that the companies say they're going to pursue all legal options that are available to them, but there's not a lot that it seems clear that they can do. CFIUS, this national security review process, doesn't really have a formal appeals process, so it would simply be, I think, looking for ways to contest this on procedural grounds. But remember, part of the reason some people think that this took so long, there were several delays in this process, is because CFIUS and the committees involved wanted to ensure that there were no procedural issues here. So it's possible that even if they try to make some sort of a claim on a procedural move, that a court would sort of dismiss it outright, a sort of summary judgment. That's the kind of thing to watch for. The other thing to watch is if President Trump comes into the White House next month and suddenly says he doesn't see a national security issue here, then maybe it can move forward, although that would be a 180 from where he has been, so we don't exactly expect that to happen.
Yeah, and just the reason for CFIUS being deadlocked in this, because they're ultimately the committee that's supposed to decide on whether this should have moved forward on national security. What was the arguments against it?
The arguments against it, we know that the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai was sort of leading the administration's opposition against it. She's a member of CFIUS. A big part of this has been that this isn't good for labor. U.S. Steelworkers Union, a huge union, very powerful politically in particular, they've been really against this, and USTR is very labor-friendly. They've been saying it isn't good for workers. On the other hand, the companies have been arguing that this is the best way for U.S. Steel to remain open and to keep these facilities running and to keep people employed. So a lot of it has been over labor. President Biden, of course, coming out today and saying that it's a national security move, that U.S. Steel needs to remain in American hands. But I would note that this is sort of, you know, an issue with President Biden's trade agenda, is that while he says he wants to, you know, encourage or improve our relationships with our allies, you would think investment from a company, from a close ally like Japan would be a good thing into a company like U.S. Steel. But he's rejecting this because on a political level, it's not good for workers.
That's what the companies have been arguing. You have a close ally in Japan, friendshoring. You have to stand up against China, especially on steel, where they've been dumping. Megan, thank you very much for joining us. Megan Casella with some color on that statement that we just got from US and Nippon Steel, which promises to go through their legal actions here after President Biden blocks the deal for the takeover. Money Movers begins after a quick break.